Thank you all for attending and for the introduction. And Andrew, I did give you warning before we start that I'll be starting with you. So I have to say that Andrew was, and Ahmed sent me some really interesting data before the panel started yesterday. And today in the morning before the panel started, I was like, Andrew, you know, I'm giving you heads up that you'll be the first one to be talking about it. So please, if you can start with the thought-provoking paper that you were talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. I think with these technologies, the futuristic technologies and so on, we look at the future, we think, and we talk about things like the future of work, the knowledge economy, and so on. But when we get down to detail, we tend to think in terms of the kind of work through the... Okay.
Microphone.
Yeah. Okay. Is that better? All right. We're getting echoes or something? Is that the problem? Okay. So my worry is that we think about the future, and we're kind of boxed in by thinking about our day jobs as they are now. So we always think about making things faster, making more things, making things more accurately, and not really having an idea that actually the nature of work is going to be very different in the future.
So it's more short-term than long-term thought process?
Yeah, I just think we tend to be boxed in by...
the immediate requirements of a project or a deadline or...
Yeah, and the way we work now. It's very difficult to think outside the way we work now. But, you know, I did a study a few years ago which got me looking at the Industrial Revolution and what happened then, and realizing that 200 years ago, nearly everybody, the work people did was selling their muscles. You know, everybody was involved in physical labor.
Yes.
And they couldn't have imagined that 200 years later, people would be sitting at desks, shuffling paper around and so on. Well, how on earth are you making the money? Where's all this? You know, and I think we have the same problem now. Because I think if you take the knowledge economy seriously, I think we'll be doing very different things. I imagine a future where most people are involved in work, which we would think of as education and research now.
Will become a reality.
Yes, so that's what interests me, and that's what interests me about intelligent models and the technology we have. Yeah. Because we tend to think of it in a kind of top-down way, that, you know, we see ourselves as experts, we're an expert panel, and we're telling, and we're going to design cities for people, we're going to gather data, and then we're going to come up with algorithms and make clever cities that work. But for me, the power of digital technology is the way it can actually empower people. It can democratize the situation and create opportunities. If you look at the really successful digital technologies, the things, whatever, like WhatsApp or Facebook, it connects people together, it empowers, it cuts out the top-down thing. Yeah. Like, you know... there's
a more horizontal communication.
Yes.
And so on. Okay. So let's start with what is city information modeling to the audience that we have. I know we have an audience of experts, but let's start with the beginning.
Go ahead. Well, yeah, I mean, from the name of it, city information modeling is, you could say more or less, a new innovation when it comes to managing information and developing comprehensive models that deal with all different sects or different components of any one specific system to come together to help you realize a whole. I mean, BIM is the origin of it in terms of buildings information modeling, which is the origin of trying to get all these different types of information, try to deal with all the conflicts between them, have one platform to bring them together to be able to solve problems, resolve conflicts, and inform better design. Same thing applies for cities to an extent, were it to come to that point where you could be dealing with infrastructure, you could be dealing with transport, traffic, people, social aspects, demographics, as well as the physical environment, and try to look at them in one complete package. I think that's the simplest way for me to look at it. It helps you start looking at the city from a more holistic point of view instead of from a more disciplined point of view, I think. And I think that's the critical potential for it. How it's used, going back to what Andrew was saying, is going to be the critical challenge. Currently, how it's used it still is a simple tool. Eventually, it will lead to a paradigm shift in how we look at the entire process. But I think, obviously, we're still not there.
So we're shifting from an asset to a portfolio, and looking at it from just a discipline and coordination that we used to do to more of an holistic approach to capture well-being and happiness. And this is what everyone is promoting right now.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. But we're also, I think, going back to what Andrew was saying, it also deals with the fact that conventionally before, drawing was the way of designing a building or designing city. Cities were still being built and still being designed, but in a completely different mechanism. During the Renaissance, when started introducing drawing and drafting as a means of understanding plans, elevations, sections, you start looking at buildings in a different perspective. CAD was the natural evolution of that, using the origins of digital technology to do the same thing, basically. Then you start introducing BIM, which start looking at buildings and structures in a different perspective to what you're saying. Now I think we're starting that early grounds of looking at cities from a different perspective.
But we go exactly to what Andrew was saying initially, that it's not just about buildings or building. Our needs and requirements have changed. Again, there's more to it than just that physical asset. You have more that you need to account for, and this is where we need to make sure that we're using that technology correctly.
Yeah, of course.
Ahmed?
For me, I have a different definition when it came to anything. I remember in 1989, there is a game called CIM City. It's a simulated city. Yes. So all people are having a space to create buildings, infrastructure, landscape, all of these things. And I think it was like, really, it can be happened in the future, something like this. Of course, nobody was believing this something can happen. For me, the definition of city information modeling is totally like a collaboration platform, which will give space to people and government entities and old construction industry related and correspondences in order to create and innovate in a digital construction way. When it came for smart cities, money will not be the way of exchange. It will be about data. All people will concerned and all entities will concern about data. If you have a data, you have a money. Now we have like a Western Union for exchanging.
That's a very thought-provoking point. Yeah.
Yes, because
data versus money.
Yes. Who owns the data right now will own the world. I remember like 2 weeks back, Elon Musk, he tweeted from the space. Literally, he tweeted from the space, like a 60 thing on 60 satellite in the space, and he tweeted using this 60 satellite. And he was tweeting that people, calls, internet will be for free. Data will be for money. Not thousands, not millions, but billions. Who owns the data owns the world. So smart cities will concern more about the data, exchange of data, analyzing even our daily expressions. If you are happy, you are sad, they will concern more about people. Why we are making building information modeling? To make that life easier. Not for aliens, for people, for us.
It's interesting that you mentioned SimCity because yesterday I was going through the articles and there is an article that actually says it's why city information modeling came out. SimCity started, people were really happy about it, and then that's where the Sims also were created. But yeah, very interesting. So I think, Omar, you mentioned it a little bit. If we can talk, Juan, a little bit about the interface between building information modeling and city information modeling. Where do you see that?
So actually, what I see is that city information modeling is at a larger scale than building information modeling. It has two different branches, as I see. One is related to the buildings. The second one is related to the infrastructure. And the relation between both is about how do we connect the information that is being used to create building information models to connect to the city information models in order to be able to gather the data, analyze this data, and take the decisions to have a better community, a better neighborhood, and at the end of the day, a better
city.
So
it's the natural development from, again, an asset to a portfolio or a city, basically.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay. Surinder.
I also feel the correlation between BIM and city information modeling, though the origins is the same and it's a progression from buildings we are getting into cities. But the difference is that we've used BIM initially to create and design buildings. Whereas in city information modeling, we'll have to study what we already have first. So there's a lot of data that comes in, and we need to study it, and then, of course, solve the ongoing issues with transport and infrastructure and so on. And that will help us as well to build the extensions of the city, and because it's very rarely that you're going to build a new city. So this is city information modeling really starts at, you know, if I have to compare, it's like doing an as-built first of the city. Then you understand the whole thing, and then you've solved the issues as you go on.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
But I do think there is a critical departure point that differs between building technology and between city information modeling. Is buildings have started with the CAD. That was the original, like CAD was the original source of digitizing, and that was not an information-based process. It's a design-based process or drawing-based process. Sure. And BIM came as a process that came in later to systematize it as a stronger platform, but also to manage different types of information. I think for when it comes to cities, cities actually had a better starting point. They already started from GIS. And geographic information systems, not as sophisticated, but the idea was to design a city on some level, it already had to start from an information management and information gathering in order to be able to make, as you're saying, to analyze and to come up with conflict resolution on some level. I think BIM is only the, CIM is only the natural evolution of that because it is taking it to 3D, because to design a city, to develop a city, it's critical. All information has always been the main backbone of city design, city development overall.
It's exactly what you said. It is the natural development of where we are right now, yeah, and that's absolutely true. But how do you see it being implemented here in the GCC? Are we seeing it? I know, Omar, that you're working currently on megacities, so is it happening?
It's starting. I mean, well, I can only talk on behalf of AECOM to an extent, but that we have already, as I said, we've been dabbling with different components of it. Obviously, because we work on massive projects of sophistication, whether it's TODs, which require all different disciplines to input with transport information, with infrastructure information, and with real estate information. People movement, like the number of variables that we deal with in all these
So
cities.
certain components are being implemented right now?
By the fact of it that we start to have to use this, the software is actually starting to be a necessity in order to be able to make logical decisions. Otherwise, decision-making is purely intuitive, which we're trying to avoid. Which we're trying to at least limit or control to an extent.
Andrew, sorry, Ahmed.
Sorry. In addition to what Omar said right now, of course, software is something essential, but when it came to BIM people and VDC people right now, we are suffering. Why? No guidelines, nothing at all.
Yes.
So we need to think as a step zero. Where is the guidelines? Where is the specs that governmental entities can provide in order to follow and in order to use in the right way? Yeah. You got my point? Like I'm Abu Dhabi municipality or Al Ain municipality, I brought AECOM, Alisdon, or KO, and please, I need my city to be smart. Okay, what is the guidelines? Yeah. So we need to think more about what will be the guidelines, what will be the specs in order to implement it in a right way. Yeah. Because again, we are thinking transferring from OpEx to a portfolio thing.
And it's always been our industry to be reactive.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and that's part of why the guidelines are sometimes missing, because we are reacting to the requirements. Andrew?
Yes. I think it's very interesting talking about understanding where we are in order to plan.
Yes.
There's also this saying that in order to know where you're going, you need to understand where you've come from. So for me, we need to also be using these intelligent modeling the tools we have to look at our histories, to understand better our histories. I mean, I think one thing that interests me is that if people think about the cities that people really love, it's very often the old cities. You know, you go to the old center of Rome or Barcelona or even Kathmandu, for example. There's a beauty there that we find it very difficult to recreate. So again, you can think in terms of technology as, okay, what have we got now? Where's the data? Let's use all the data and come up with some future. But if we don't understand our deep history as a species and how we've built cities for thousands of years and put that knowledge inside where we're moving forwards, you know, town planning's made a lot of disasters, actually. I think we all know. So, you know, the futuristic thing is part of the picture, but I think we also need to use the technology to understand our past and to bring people into also thinking about our
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Juan, coming to that point, in order to understand what cities have been doing in the past, I know that topic will be later on as a panel. We can use digital twins to understand how cities are being used, how people
what made them successful.
And we need to understand as well that every city is different. Maybe the culture will affect how cities behave as well, and understanding the particularities of every region to know how to plan the city to make it work well for the citizens.
That's a very valid point, because it takes into account not just, again, the requirements and, you know, the numbers and statistics, but also the humane part of it. And exactly what you said, Andrew, what made that city beloved. You didn't have any city information modeling, did you? Or BIM. So actually, this is our next point. You know, what can we do to harvest data in order to understand what the residents would require from the city that they would eventually live in? You know, what is it that we need to understand in order to create that city that will be beloved like Barcelona and Rome and Kathmandu?
Well, I think that first of all, I know that this is a known fact that we need to open the data to everyone, for everyone to actually participate, make the data open to the citizens. One of the probably success for all cities was that people was actually part of them, on how cities were created. And to be able to open the data to the citizens and participate as part of the city planning will help the city be more as citizens will expect from it. And of course, when we are using data, as Ahmad was saying, we need to make sure that the data is following some patterns in order to be able to analyze the data in a proper way.
But that's back to data again, and whether that's available or not remains a question mark.
I think there are two parts to that, though. So there's the part that Ahmed said, where he's talking about data as money. And then there's the notion of democratizing data, which means transparency.
You need to start collecting data very quickly.
Yeah, so I think you do have both dilemmas, where data is being controlled by entrepreneurs like Elon Musk and others that have that access and can pay for it. Whereas you have a model that actually is trying to encourage almost the opposite, which is to have a lot more free data or available data for people to be able to assess. I think those two elements are always going to be in conflict. Whoever has more obviously has more power, and as a result, people would want to control it. However, to work on that, I think that is going to be a critical element. I think the other element is what we're defining as data. Again, when we look at what, again, Andrew was saying, when looking at sourcing information or knowledge from history, what is it exactly that you're trying to do? Are you talking about patterns of relationships? Are you trying to get social that social demographic relationships. It's all about relationships. It's less about the data per se.
And a very subjective
how,
data.
And how that data is put together and understood. I think there's always the fear of, I had a professor of mine that used to be a planner, and then she became a professor of history. She said, the reason I stopped being a planner is I stopped to act like God. And I think the problem is when you actually talk about what we're talking about now, that is amplified 100 times. A person that thinks they have all the knowledge in the world because they have all the data, I think those knowledge and data are two very different things, and we have to be very cautious of what we're doing in order to avoid that conflict, because people that have more knowledge more data will think they have more knowledge, and that's where planners always fail.
Okay, so that gets me to the next question. Do you think the team that needs to work on city information modeling should be different than the usual teams that we have? Because, you know, we have town planners, then we have, and it becomes very technical. It becomes infrastructure, and it becomes requirements and utilities and so on. But now you're talking again about that layer that is added to a city, Omar, and I totally agree with you, because it becomes bigger. It's not just a building housing hundreds of people, it's more than that. So would the team be different? Would you be looking at social advisors? Would you be looking at historic?
Maybe if you think of something like Wikipedia,
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about SimCity. If you put SimCity and Wikipedia together, okay, where you have thousands of people around the world contributing to a discussion, which is then curated and becomes so that you involve more people. I have a friend in the UK that I went to university with who has spent most of his life working in an area called community planning. And there is a whole community out there, and they don't work with technology. They work with cardboard and you know, but they work with groups of people talking about what they want their neighborhood to be like and so on. So you can imagine what's been learnt by that community and what's been learnt by people, things like Wikipedia, about how to crowdsource the curating of knowledge.
Knowledge,
Let's
true.
call it knowledge or
I think,
wisdom.
yeah, I think knowledge.
And then tools like SimCity, which become then city information modeling, and how to bring all that together to create this democratized kind of approach to.
And I think, Farah, this is working. It's working. Not so much. Oh, yeah. I think again, to address your point, it's not a matter of who we're doing it. I think it actually goes even further back. It's the education process itself. Training people as planners, urban designers, architects, blah, 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 economists. This clear division is directly in contradiction with that platform approach. So I think it has to go all the way back to schools, where you're going to teach people he's not going to be a planner in the conventional sense.
We're doing it currently, right now, with the resources that we have. So that's something that we probably need to think about and maybe discuss on later. Yeah. But Juan, what are your thoughts? What do you think? What do you think residents would require for?
So I remember seeing a TED talk from in the US, from Gensler, where they were doing city planning by asking in a school the kids what they were willing to see in the city. And they involved in the city planning the ideas. Some of them were applicable, some of them were not that applicable, as flying cars. But in summary, what they actually did was to involve people, and actually kids, in order to know what they expect from the city to help them be more integrated within the city, and that collaboration with citizens to open the data, to make them be part of the city planning will help everyone to make better decisions.
I think it's a really good idea to engage kids, because boundaries are not yet there. Yes. Boundaries that we usually put ourselves before we even start thinking about it. Talking about flying cars, what makes a smarter city? You know, we're talking about city information modeling. We know smart buildings, and we're already there. But what does it make a city smart?
Yeah.
Ahmed?
Yeah. We are always speaking again. It's not about technology. It's not about smart cities. It's about who will utilize this one. So in addition to what Juan said right now, we need to add 2 layers. Researchers, academic researchers with our teams, and the public people itself. So we have qualitative and quantitative research in order to understand what are people thinking, what they need to make their city smarter and a better way of living. And again, when it came to information modeling, it's not like literally 3D modeling. No, it's about having incubation about the information and data to have like a model or a template, a framework, a protocol. So we need to think about modeling not like software or 3D modeling, because we have already a built environment here, like in Dubai. So how Dubai need to be like in 2021, the first smart city in the world or something like this? Of course, they will not reinvent the wheel, or they will not remodel their cities, but they will model the information in a template, something like this.
Andrew. Oh, sorry.
Yes. So there's the obvious, when we talk about smart cities, what makes a smart city?
Exactly.
Is, the physical stuff, like the transportation, infrastructure, all the other stuff, which is the physical environment, which makes the quality of life of the residents better. But there's also the human capital that comes in. Does a city attract top talent? Does it support innovation? Does it support all kinds of entrepreneurship and all that? So if you look at certain, there are various agencies out there rating the smart cities. So these are some of the factors that they look at.
And we're hearing a lot about well-being and health and obviously another, which is sustainability, which is really important for us at MottMacDonald, and I believe all of us here. How do you think, creating a smart city will help with that? We're still defining at this stage all of this. Andrew, smart cities, what does it, what is it?
What's a smart city?
What's a smart city? We keep using smart cities and city information modeling in your point of view.
Yeah, a smart city is what the people who live in the city think is smart.
Their requirements.
We can make a definition, we can sit down as a panel of experts and come up with a definition of what we think a smart city is. But if it's really going to work, it's got to come out of engaging, allowing ordinary people to come in and
so
be part of the discussion.
It's flexible, basically, and agile enough to take on what the requirements are.
The smartness comes in being able to engage the citizens, I think. If you think of the smartness in abstract terms of defining smartness, but the smartness is how can you actually, engage people in thinking, in being part of the process. That's what's smart.
And helping them in achieving it.
The tools then
which comes into smart infrastructure.
Because they enable that in a way that was impossible. In ancient Athens, you had few enough people to have a democracy that was just people talking to each other face to face.
Because there weren't
now we have the tools, we can talk to each other in digital networks. So maybe we can get that same kind of idea back of a community of people making decisions together about their city by using the technology. But it's still the same idea that the smartness is not the technology.
It's the
just
people
a facilitator of
an enabler
people. The smartness, the knowledge, the wisdom has to come
from people.
From us.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's true. Ahmad, what do you think? What makes a smart city?
I mean, ideally, I wish we stop using the term because it talks about
what would you use other than smart city?
I think it's well, I don't have a term, but I think it's simply city is about change. Any mechanism that allows adaptability and change, to me, that's the smartness. The difference that we had in conventional planning and conventional city building is that did not adapt to change. You have rigid regulations, you have rigid zoning laws, you have rigid codes, everything is rigid. So while technology is changing, people are changing, society is changing,
rigid
the world is changing.
50 years.
And 50 years in the making, exactly. You now have, which has always been the case. Cities are always changing, people are always changing, demographics are always changing, but cities are always lagging behind. I think to be smart is your ability to be able to adapt to change quickly. And that's where the technology can help, but it's definitely not the solution. Technology is still driven by the planners and by the city management.
Technology is the enabler. It facilitates.
But it also is the trend, as in, as long as people are still dealing with it right now, as if we're so proud that we have BIM, we're so proud that we have these technologies, we're so good with all this data, that's great. But once we get over that, maybe 5 years, 10 years, and we start looking at as has-been kind of thing, we start looking at this in a more in-depth manner. I was just talking to Ahmed this morning. It reminds me of movies where, technology in cinema has changed so drastically in the last 10, 15 years that most of the directors and producers have stopped worrying about the actual movie in terms of the film, what you're getting from a storytelling.
And more about
and they're about how do you engage all the new technologies. As they start maturing and the technologies become a matter of history, they actually start going back to the origin of what is it that I'm trying to say.
What is the plot line?
So I think the same thing applies to our BIM technology. It's still, everybody's so excited about it. I want it in my projects. I wanted this, I wanted that. But do you actually know what it's going to do? I think that's a limitation.
And that's our challenge in the industry. I remember I read an article also that a year ago, and I don't think it changed much, where it was showing that the construction industry is still lagging in technology because we are always reacting to what's happening. We're not actually being proactive, and that's where the codes and regulations come in, and that's why we're using 50-year-old specifications in some instances. And so that's something, again, that's thought-provoking. Juan? Yeah.
No, I think that a smart city is a responsive city, and a responsive city making good decisions. In order to make these good decisions, we have to analyze the information, of course, and we can see it in two different ways, on how we connect with digital twins the city and gather the data, and then how do we use actually city information modeling for making good goals and objectives out of it. So for energy modeling, energy consumption, to do acoustic analysis, to do many kind of analysis out of the city information modeling that will help us to make the city smarter.
Take it a further step beyond what we are talking about as in planning and so on, and actually going into the implementation of and the construction of cities. So we have a lot of challenges right now within the cities that we're in. We have pollution, we have overpopulation, we have a huge demand on our existing infrastructure, and we're seeing it everywhere. How can city information modeling help?
To be honest, in addition to what Juan said and Omar said, it's about adaptive solutions, responsive cities. If you have a responsive city, which means it will calculate and measure pollution level, noise level, whatever happening in the city, it will give you like a direct response, a real-time response that please go there, you need to change, it's all about data analysis and information analysis. So at the end of the day, you will have smart city, a transition period of responsive city in order to have a livable city. What does mean by livable city? Zero pollution, zero noise, exchange of data in the right way, and all of these things. So we need to think as a smart city is the first step for a livable city. And there is a media between these ones, the adaptive solutions, as Omar said, which is the responsive city.
It's the ability to gather the information and the problems that you pointed out, overpopulation, pollution, and all that. With smart city systems, everything is integrated, so you get to know about the issues straight away. And once you identify problems, finding solution is not that difficult. It's usually finding the problem, which is the problem. So as the others have pointed out, smarter cities will be responsive and flexible to handle these challenges as they come up.
Challenges.
So I believe that nowadays technology is evolving very rapidly, and that's helping all the challenges that we previously had in order to achieve better city information modeling. For building information modeling, we had software and applications that help us to move faster. Now there are new applications for the past 3 years that is helping us to move faster for city information modeling. And that challenges are being now tackled by all these new applications that we can see in the market nowadays.
Okay. So we're looking at the existing challenges and trying to prevent them in our future planning. But we still have the challenges as they exist right now. So yeah. Omar, do you want to add anything
Obviously,
here?
the main challenge moving forward is about privacy. Because everything we're talking about is about data.
Yeah.
And that means, in Ahmed's talking, we'll find out who's happy, who's sad, who's doing this, who's done that, who's going here, who's going there. Obviously, that will be the big challenge, is how do you, again, balance between people that have the knowledge, the data, and between people's right for privacy. And I think it will always be it will be the growing concern as more and more people are connected and more things are connected, that you don't have much privacy. And I think that's always going to be.
And it's the case. It's already existing where privacy is an issue. We are sharing a lot of information online, and it's one of the results of sharing that information online. Yeah.
I think also the other challenge, on the other hand, is acceptance. Acceptance of people to change or to accept the change itself. We are suffering right now, to be honest, when it came to change the mindset of some people. When it came, please, leave 2D, come to the 3D environment. You will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So okay, let's implement it, and nobody's using this one. So we need to change the mindset first of people, to educate them, to deploy the knowledge, to make the guidelines, specs, to give them the full stack in order to have their data as a private data, and to give them the understanding about what is smart city and what is the responsive city and how can it will lead to the livable city.
Andrew, anything to add here?
Yes, I just want to pick up on the comment about the movie directors and movies. Because
okay, go ahead.
That's an interesting one because today, actually, anybody can make a movie today. Everybody's making movies.
We are, yeah, we already are.
I upload movies to YouTube almost every week, you know. And so...
There's TikTok also, which my daughter is using, but yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, but there are lots of people making even those kind of, you know, actual full-type movies. It's become democratized. Yeah. And you can imagine the same thing happening with intelligent modeling, that, you know, groups of people can come together and use the technology. So that it's shifting from our current mindset of the way we do things now and just make it a bit faster, make it more efficient, to saying, actually, the point was made that maybe these separate, the current definitions of a planner and an architect and will dissolve in the future, and you know, we'll just be citizens interacting and forming groups and flexibly moving and forming a different group and so on. You can imagine a very different future, actually. Well, when it's very difficult.
I'm trying to imagine that, and then I'm thinking about the number of people that will be involved, Andrew, in getting to a decision about how the city looks. But yeah, it
works from Wikipedia. I mean,
it does.
There are
to an extent, yeah.
It's hard, but
yeah. So we talked a little bit about health and happiness and well-being. And very subjectively, obviously. And this last question is like using data to measure them. I personally can't measure how happy I am, it depends. But Ahmed, what do you think? Because you keep talking about data, so I'm giving you that question now.
What is the best way of measuring this one? Enter any shop right now, any store, quantitative research. You will have 3 faces, sad, neutral, happy. Click happy. You got my point?
I'll leave it to Ahmed to point it that way. Yeah,
yes,
but go ahead.
Yes, so that's why when you need to measure, you need to first introduce these things, the technology things, these fancy tablets. But some people are faking this responses. So they are connecting right now the CCTV, and they are measuring the face reactions. So you are happy, you are sad, you are fighting with your wife in the house, something like this. So even they can understand that you are going to commit a crime in the future.
Based on facial...
Based on facial expressions.
The thought police are coming.
So that's why when it came to measuring your happiness level or whatever level, it depends on two things. The direct thing and indirect. Direct with responses, a happy, neutral, and like a rating, Likert scale, and the other one is about...
You're looking at it from an abstract point of view. Andrew is looking at it from a more democratized point of view. So it's really nice to see all of these